Yep, we're starting. Good evening, everybody. It's 6 o'clock, so we are going to start, councillors. We are going to start. Before we do that, I just want to make a personal statement, if I may. Because of recent surgery that I've had, my voice is not yet at full strength, and I can only speak for limited periods of time, which some people might say is a blessing. So if need be this evening, if I struggle, I'm going to hand over to the Vice Chair, Councillor Iannucci, who's kindly agreed to support me. I apologise in advance for any disruption that's caused by that, and I hope that committee will bear with me. And given that, I'm going to hand over to Mark from Democratic Services, who will take us through the housekeeping. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. And welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Place Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday, 6th of January, 2026. I'm just going to start with some brief housekeeping rules. May I remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting is being live streamed, as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking, in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in the chamber or by using the remote hand raise function if they're online. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by the chair, please could they turn their camera on to indicate they wish to speak, or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address the meeting by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please could they turn their camera on. Please bring this to the attention of the chair and/or Democratic Services officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or Democratic officer know. So please could I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, co-opted representatives, cabinet members, our officers, Vale residents, and to anyone watching this live meeting broadcast. That's everything in terms of housekeeping. I'll hand back over to the chair now.
Many thanks, Mark. So if we move straight on to the agenda, are there any apologies for absence, please?
I've had one through so far, Chair, from Mrs Mitchell, one of our tenant reps.
Thank you. And also apologies from Councillor Stallard, who may be able to join us later this evening, but may not be able to. We now move on to the minutes of the previous meeting of the Place Scrutiny Committee held on the 18th of November 2025. Are members happy to approve? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. And now we move on to declarations of interest. Are there any? So I need to declare in relation to agenda item 4, the Vale of Glamorgan Deposit Replacement Local Development Plan. I'm an independent member of Cardiff and Vale Health Board, who are a statutory consultee for the plan. My interest is personal and not prejudicial, so I shall remain in the meeting. I also want to ensure that everybody understands the process that we're going to follow this evening. I'm Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby, for those who don't know me. This committee consists of 13 members, including myself and non-voting co-opted representatives. And just to explain that the role of this scrutiny committee is to consider the information in the reports before us this evening, listen to all the views expressed, and consider whether or not we agree with the proposals or want to make any recommendations back to the Council's Cabinet for their consideration. We don't make the final decisions on proposals. That responsibility sits with full Council. Officers will present proposals, and I'll then invite the Cabinet member if they wish to make any comments on the proposals. followed by members of the public who've joined us tonight to speak on the revised local development plan. In line with the rules for public participation, each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to speak. I'll then invite any non-committee members who wish to speak, and finally members of the committee will debate the issue. I hope that's clear. And just one final announcement, if I may. I'd like to propose that we take agenda item 5 next, as I anticipate we may have a longer debate around agenda item 4. That might prove to be misjudged, but that will enable officers just to leave earlier and enjoy their evening if they wish. Is committee happy with that proposal? Any dissent? No, thank you. Thank you very much, members. So given that, we'll move on to agenda item 5, the final housing revenue account budget proposals 2026-27, rent setting 2026-27, and housing revenue account business plan 2026-27. There are a number of recommendations in the report for our consideration this evening, and we're joined by thank you, by Matt Bowyer, Mike Ingram and Nick Jones, who will take us through it. And I believe you have a presentation for us. So over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm going to lead and take you through the majority of the slides. Halfway through, there are a couple on affordability and tenant support, and Mike is going to take over at that point. So a dozen or so slides will probably take about 10-15 minutes, if that's okay. So I believe Democratic Services colleagues have the slide deck and they're going to put them up. Brilliant. Thank you very much. As Bydd, there's 3 elements to this report: the housing revenue account budget proposals for 26/7, rent setting for 26/7, and the HRA business plan, the 30-year business plan starting 2026-27. So move on to the next slide, please. So some of this is a general reminder to people, and you're possibly no doubt aware of some of what's on here. So the first thing is the report covers the final HRA budget proposal for 26/7. The HRA is a ring-fenced account, self-financed, mainly through council dwelling rents and expenditure. And that expenditure consists of staff and management provision, repairs and maintenance costs, of capital financing costs, service debt, and revenue contributions towards the capital programme. It's quite a simple model when you look at it in those words, but quite complex to actually deliver over a 30-year time horizon. The report also sets out the proposed rents and service charges for the coming financial year. And as part of the Renting Homes Act, the council is required to give 2 months' notice of any increases in council rents to council tenants. And that's the real driver for bringing this report forward at this time. The report also sets out the 30-year housing business plan, which is in Appendix A, and that's supported by a detailed model. The submission deadline for the housing business plan is 31st of March, but it totally makes sense if we're recommending rent levels for 26/7 that we do that in the context of the business plan and the actual HRA budget, and we consider all those at the same time. Next slide, and Councillor Lloyd Selby has just referred to the recommendations briefly. So the 7 recommendations here this evening. Recommendations 2 to 7 will be recommendations 1 to 6 when the report goes to Cabinet on Thursday. And at this stage, recommendation 1, we're asking that Scrutiny review the report and make any recommendations on recommendations 2 to 7 below, which are being considered by Cabinet on Thursday. So we're looking to approve the final housing revenue account budget for 26/7, and I'll talk about a little bit more about that on slide 5. Cabinet's recommended to approve an average rent increase of 4.3%, and there's some more detail in that in a moment. Also recommended to approve the increases for certain service charges. and recommended to approve all changes to rent and service charges to be implemented from the 1st of April. The first week of April is a non-chargeable rent week. The Cabinet also approves the 30-year plan, and that should say, yeah, that's 2026 to 56, so that's our 30-year plan. So I just wanted to provide a couple of updates on the next slide, some of which are in the report, but just wanted to highlight these in a little bit more detail. So there has been a consultation by Welsh Government on the overruling policy that was carried out over the late summer and a little bit into the autumn. 29th of September, we had an announcement by Jane Bryant, the Cabinet Secretary for Housing and Local Government. And actually, there aren't many great changes to the existing policy. So affordability remains at the heart of the policy, and that's writ clear, and that was a clear focus in the statement that she made at the time. There's no convergence proposed at this time between the various social housing providers. Welsh Government citing that being as inherently complex, and that's a fair comment, I guess. There's some minor changes around the rent increase levels year on year. We've been working on a CPI +1 basis the last few years, so there's some minor adjustments to that. Where CPI is low, between 0 and 3%, there can be increases of CPI +1. Where CPI is a little bit higher, they can between 3 and 5%, then the increases are limited a little bit to CPI +0.5. And where CPI is running at 5% or greater, then there's a ministerial responsibility to come in and consider. The September CPI remains the index point, and there was some debate about that in the consultation. And what Welsh Government are doing is looking to put stability into the arrangements. So the intention is that these arrangements are in place for the next 10 years. Following that, 13th of November, they actually announced the 26-27 settlement, confirming that CPI +0.5, given that September CPI 2025 was 3.8%. So it's a bit of background. Also, you recall that we took the initial 26-7 proposals alongside the mid-year 2025 6 report to Cabinet in November, and we wrote round to scrutiny members, inviting them to comment, and I also made the offer of briefing to members as well. Next slide, please. So these are the headlines, and this table's in the report. The expenditure on the HRA is increased up to, it's quite small on my screen, is up to £28.7 million, an increase of just over £1 million on 2025-6, and similarly then on the income side, income up to £28.8 million from 27.7 in 2025-6. We were running a small surplus in 25-6. There's a slightly larger one in 26-7 now as a consequence of the changes. So in year surplus of 149, and that will increase the working balance on the HRA to £4.3 million. Sorry, it's brought forward, bringing it up to 4.474. You may recall that our working balance historically has been £1 million, which is broadly equivalent to a month's rent, and we will be working back towards that number over the next couple of years. There had been some risks with some implementation of the Renting Homes Act that meant we needed to have a bit more cover for a couple of years, but those risks are ebbing. So that's the overall position. And the next slide just sets that out in a pie chart, which is a bit more user-friendly, hopefully. You'll see that the key spend areas are on the repairs and maintenance, the capital expenditure contributions and capital financing costs, and then the remainder of the costs are the management and supervision of the HRA itself and the operations. Going on to slide 7, thank you very much. Just to take you through some of the changes from the original budget in 25/6 through to the proposed budget for 26/7. So there's been some, not surprisingly, pay inflation, and across the council we've been forecasting 3% for pay. There's been the need for savings to mitigate against increased costs, and those have been generated through decreasing utility costs, some upside on investment income, reduced provisions, and because of the balance of the work in the HRA capital programme, the ability to charge technical salaries in. There's committed growth, not surprisingly, capital financing and repairs are the key ones, but also some staffing with the need to develop the development team, albeit, as I've just said, some of that's rechargeable to the capital programme. The rent increase then is 4.3%, and the dwelling rents will increase by £1.183 million net of voids on the total stock. Thank you. Next slide, please. So moving on to the rents and just some exemplars of the average rents across the estate for bungalows, flats, houses, maisonettes, and the total average. So as I said, a 4.3% increase. So that's an increase of £5.40 for bungalows, £4.71 for flats, £5.86 for houses, £5.15 for maisonettes, and the total average is a £5.38 increase. The I know we were asked this last year, so we just pulled out some information on the lowest and highest. The lowest rent for a single bed flat will be £102.76, and the highest is £159.19 for a 6-bed house. I did mention the fact that the Welsh Government's just reviewed its policy. The council's rent policy's in place, been in place for in excess of 10 years, and the team are intending to review that in the forthcoming year. On to service charges as well. So the report sets out the proposed fees and charges for service charges. These are all increased in line with cost. So there's some variation there. Some are actually going up, and some are falling back. But that's just a pass through. Those costs are just passed directly on to the tenants with no add-on through the HRA. So I'm just going to hand over briefly to Mike now. He's just going to talk about rent affordability and also about tenant support.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thank you, committee. I think it's fair to say that nobody looks forward to an increase in their housing costs, but as Matt has explained, every pound of tenants' rent is reinvested back into the HRA, either in 3/4 of our spend is going on new build or investment in our existing stock. Just a little bit about affordability. Clearly, it was a key aim of the Welsh Government that their policy has to balance the needs of the council as a business, I suppose, in terms of our priorities, in terms of delivering new housing to deal with our housing crisis in the Vale of Glamorgan, but also in terms of wanting to continue to invest in our existing housing stock and bringing those standards up as best as we can in achieving the Welsh Housing Quality Standard. I suppose in that context, the issue around affordability is different in different areas of the country. And what this slide does is to set out the issues around affordability and council house rents in the Vale of Glamorgan. And the slide demonstrates that in terms of the 30th centile, which is the measure at which income above which income is deemed to be below which income is deemed to be unaffordable. And as you can see, 14% of the average income in the Vale is at the 30th centile, the lowest earners category. And the rent for a one bed is around 26% of the average income. Matt has mentioned earlier that we're looking to review the policy in the coming 12 months, and that's really an indication of the fact that our one-bedroom housing, our one-bedroom flats, predominantly more of our tenants' income is being spent compared to our larger three-bedroomed housing. And the policy allows us to flex so that we don't get to a situation where some of our single households, single-person households, or couple households find themselves in somewhat of a poverty trap, where they become reliant on welfare benefits in order to cover their housing costs. In terms of where do our rents sit in terms of affordability, we're 11th out of the 22 local authorities in terms of that affordability index. And in terms of local housing allowance, as members will know, private rents in the Vale of Glamorgan are extremely high and have been high for quite a period of time. Council house rents are 20% cheaper than the local housing allowance, and 37% cheaper than the average private sector rents in the Vale of Glamorgan, and therefore, we would argue that our rents are as affordable as they can be. Just on that point, the Vale Council rents are also the cheapest of all social landlords that operate in the Vale of Glamorgan. So our RSL partners, whilst also charging, they would argue affordable rents. The council house rents are lower than other social landlords. Within the policy, there's a requirement on the local authority to agree to a number of considerations. One of which is around engaging with our tenants. We do that, as members will be aware, every couple of years through our STAR survey. The last STAR survey, nearly 80% of our tenants indicated that their rent was affordable or very affordable. 20% of our tenants indicated that they found it unaffordable, and 1.5% felt that the rent was very unaffordable. As I say, it's a perception analysis rather than undergoing a strict affordability test. But that's the perception from the last STAR survey. Just a couple of things as well around affordability. We also welcome some national changes to welfare benefits, which has improved the financial position, or will improve the financial position, of a number of our tenants from April. Two of note. One is the increase in the universal credit standard rate, which is increasing, I think, by 6.2% in April. And also, obviously, the two-child benefit cap is due to be removed in April as well, which will obviously take considerable numbers of children in the Vale out of child poverty. Next slide, please. In terms of support to our tenants who do find themselves in financial difficulty, members will also be aware, and we've brought reports to scrutiny committees previously with regard to the work of the Money Advice Service. Prior to any tenancy sign-up, a money advice interview is held where we undertake an affordability questionnaire with the incoming tenant. At that stage, clearly, we need to ensure that the tenant can afford the rent. But secondly, it also allows us the opportunity to ensure that tenants are maximising their income either through benefits or other grants or other mechanisms by which we can potentially increase their income. Over the last 12 months, the report indicates that the additional income secured by our money advice service to our tenants was over £500,000. So hopefully that gives a flavour of the support that we provide. In terms of the future, there is also a requirement within the policy that we undertake work with Welsh Government and other third sector organisations to publicise our support that we make available and the services we make available to our tenants when they do find themselves potentially in financial difficulties. We have done that historically through our rents team. So if our rents team are writing to any of our tenants, we also provide information in relation to affordability and an offer of a money advice interview. And more recently, we've reintroduced our tenant newsletter. And our tenant newsletter going forward will also include a standard item on affordability and measures that can be implemented to support our tenants. That's me done, Mark. And if we can pass back to Matt.
Thanks, Mark. Just a couple of slides now to finish off on the capital programme side of the HRA. So this next slide sets out the ambitions, and it is a very ambitious HRA, and there are very many demands on it at this time. Key are the Welsh Housing Quality Standard and meeting that and other maintenance challenges. As you see, this planned expenditure over the next 5 years of £121 million, between 20 and 30 million pounds a year on that alone. And then the ambitions, given the homelessness challenges in the Vale, the ambitious new build programme, again £157 million programmed in there across 5 years. So investment across the Vale of 278 million, delivering 474 additional units. These are the ones coming into use, so there might be a slight mismatch with some of the more detailed numbers in the main body of the actual business plan itself. Thank you. Could do the next slide, please. Again, this just sets it out graphically. A big proportion, as you see over on the right-hand side, is regeneration and new build, 43% of the programme. Also in there are environmental improvements and energy efficiency, 7% and 15% respectively. Work on internal works, bathrooms, kitchens, etc., 11%. Leaseholder blocks and external wall insulation, porches, etc., 13%, and works to the communal areas as well. So quite a range of activity. It's often the case that pounds and pence and percentages don't always do it for us. So there's some numbers on the next slide, setting out the scale of those works and what it actually looks like on the ground. So in terms of kitchen replacements over the next 5 years, the best part of 3,000 of those, 179 next year, but the programme gradually ramping up over the next 2 or 3 years. Increased number of works on bathrooms, 676 of those over the next 5 years. Works on central heating and boiler replacements, which obviously have a massive impact on our tenants, 1,398 of those are the 5 years. Rewiring works, roof renewals, walls and repainting, windows and doors, blocks, and then finish off with the external wall insulation and the like. So quite a significant programme of works, and hopefully that those numbers bring a little bit more to life. So just to finish off with next steps. So this report, identical report, goes forward to Cabinet on Thursday, and that will be recommended on to Council on the 12th of January, this being a Council decision. We do incorporate these proposals then in the Council's final capital proposals and Treasury management strategy, but they'll essentially have been approved on the 12th of January. So they're just in the Council's overall numbers as well for completeness. And then the new rent increases will take place from the 1st of April 2026. So that's all from myself and Mike in terms of introducing the report, and we're obviously both on hand to take any questions, and we've also got Nick with us as well, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt and Mike. I believe the relevant Cabinet member, Councillor Perks, has also joined committee this evening. Councillor Perks, did you want to add anything to the presentation and the comments that have already been made? If you do, please just come online.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And I suppose it just the housing revenue account is just how important it is that we helps us to maintain the housing stock that we have, and also build further stock that we desperately need to, as has been mentioned, Welsh housing quality standards, and ensuring that people have safe, secure homes at an affordable rent as well. So yes, I think sort of finalising this budget proposal 26-27 is really important for the plans that we have going forward with council housing, both our existing stock and the future stock that we wish to build as well. So yes, that's all I'll say on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perks. And now, are there any non-committee members joining us this evening who'd like to ask any questions or make a comment? Councillor Burnett, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually just coming in for clarification, because this is actually my report, as it's a financial report, as much as it deals with the housing portfolio. And I think the one thing that I did want to draw attention to is that when we talk about the housing revenue account, we need to recognise that actually this is a totally separate entity from the budget setting process that we do, because it is actually it has its own business plan. We look to deliver all the services, all the improvements and everything else from within the housing revenue account. And when we were talking about it being in effect business, it's a social enterprise, because we actually use the income that we derive from council housing rents to provide more council houses, to provide maintenance and improvement and renovation on the existing stock. And we do that because we are a social enterprise. We do not go for the maximum. That's why you can see that not only are we providing housing at a more cost-effective level than other people in the social housing sector, but also at about a third less than the private sector.
Sorry, so, Councillor, we're just taking a point of order in the chamber. Councillor Hooper, point of order.
Yeah, Councillor Burnett just said that we weren't taking the maximum level, and we've just heard that we are taking the maximum level. So I wonder whether she can clarify the point. 4.3% is the maximum level allowable by Welsh Government. Thank you.
Yeah, just sorry to say, yeah, Councillor Burnett, if you'd like to just clarify that and then continue that. Councillor Burnett, are you still with us? Yeah, Councillor Burnett, did you want to come back in?
Sorry, am I not in? Right, fine. Yeah, I was going to say that if we talk in terms of increase, there is a maximum set, but that is not necessarily reflective of what's happening in the private sector or anything like that. If we look in terms of the one slide that Matt used, the actual costs of rented accommodation, we are at a lower level than any other organisation providing social rented accommodation in the Vale, and we are about a third less. In fact, in some areas of the Vale, I would argue more than a third less than the private rental sector, which is why it's so crucially important that we are able to not only build more properties, build more social housing in the Vale, but also to make sure that the properties that we have are maintained and improved to the highest possible standard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hooper, did you want to come back in on that specific point?
Yeah, I think it's really important. This is a really important issue. We've got people who are the most vulnerable in our society paying these rents. And I think it's important we have accuracy. And what I'd like to hear from the leader is that she actually reflects the fact that what she said earlier was incorrect. She said that we hadn't taken the maximum, and we have taken the maximum. The maximum is 4.3%. It's exactly the same increase that we've proposed, that is being proposed tonight. So you can't, it is critical. I think she used the phrase, it's critically important that people understand these things properly. Well, it's critically important we have accuracy. So I'd welcome a retraction so that it's accurate for the minutes and it's accurate for those people who are sitting and listening to their rent increases go up by 4.3%.
I think the point has been clarified, but I'll give the leader the opportunity to come back in again if you'd like to, Councillor. Thank you.
I think it was totally clarified. And as I said, is that in terms of the rents that are charged to our tenants are lower than anybody else in the rental sector will find in the Vale of Glamorgan. And that is how we would want it done. But more than anything, and as Councillor Hooper would understand, because he actually does understand social enterprise, that the whole purpose of this is to be able to provide more and better quality houses for the people of the Vale of Glamorgan. I will make it even more clear when I take this back on Thursday, but I think that we can be totally clear that social rented housing in the Vale of Glamorgan will continue to be lower than any other rental sector within the Vale.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hennessy, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Let me just alter my monitor. I have two questions, one for Matt and one for Mike Ingram. I'll go with Matt first. Matt, are you able to tell us how much is owed by tenants in unpaid rent currently? And the question for Mike Ingram is how many council properties currently have had no WQS work done whatsoever?
Thank you, Councillor. Matt, if you'll take the first question, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll have to apologise to Councillor Hennessy. I don't have the outstanding rents number in front of me. I'm not sure if Mike might be able to help me out on that front.
Mike Ingram, are you able to respond to either of those questions? If not, I'm sure the information can be provided subsequent to this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hennessy, the figure for rent arrears is in the region of £800,000, which equates to somewhere in the region of 2% of the rent roll. Much of that is attributed, that increase in rent arrears is attributed to the move from what was housing benefit to universal credit. Housing benefit was paid for in advance. Universal credit is paid for in arrears, and therefore a lot of our tenants are in arrears directly as a result of them waiting for their universal credit claim to be paid. In relation to your second question, WHQS is a standard. If the property reaches the standard, then no work is done because it's achieved the standard. However, as each of the components have a life cycle, different properties at different times will require different component replacement. So in the associated business plan to this report, there's a table within the business plan which indicates the life cycle of each of the component parts. So I would be surprised if no property has not had any work done at all, given that WHQS has been in place now for the last 15, 17 years or so. But as members will be aware, the council did achieve the WHQS standard back in 2018, I think it was. But of course, component and replacement is an ongoing process for each of our properties for years and years to come.
Thank you very much, Mike. Then we'll move on. I don't see any other hands from non-committee members, so we'll move on to committee members. Councillor Hooper.
Chair, I've got a couple of questions and then a point I'd like to make at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah, 2 or 3 questions, Max.
These are important.
No, hang on, Councillor Hooper. And then I'm very happy to bring you back in for additional questions. I just don't want to have too many questions all at once.
I'll be quick, but I think they're important. Matt, you referenced the risks from Rent in Home Act have changed. Can you just give us an update on that? We talk about 21.5% of people are either say that rents are either unaffordable or very unaffordable. I'd be really interested, Mike, in knowing how that's changed, specifically not just year on year, but maybe over the last 5 years or 10 years since the great financial crash. You may not have that detail at hand, but I think that's important to know how that may or may not have changed. We referenced the fact that we are 11th of 22 councils in Wales in terms of affordability. My understanding is there's only 11 councils that actually have housing stocks. Does that mean we are the 11th most expensive? Or please tell me differently. Very quick. You can stop me. I've been quick.
Sorry, we'll take these 3 questions and then I'll bring you straight back in, Councillor Hooper, for any additional questions. Thank you. Matt.
The Renting Homes Act, there has been some testing of the Act, not in the county council owned sector, but the registered social landlord sector generally, and those have proven to work in our favour. This was quite a big risk 12-18 months ago, but the direction of travel is favourable. We did as a council when we closed our 25/6 accounts actually include a contingent liability, but I wouldn't anticipate us needing to do the same with the, sorry, that was the 2024/5 accounts. I wouldn't expect us to be doing similar with the 25/6 ones. I think Mike will pick up your next question, please.
Yeah, I think there were 2 questions for me, wasn't there, Councillor Hooper? One was around the trend in relation to tenants' perceptions and in relation to affordability. The STAR survey is undertaken every couple of years, every 2 years, and we'll dig out the trends because the same question has been asked over the last 2 or 3 STAR surveys, and I'll dig those out and send those to members of committee. In terms of the point relating to affordability, just to be clear, that's around all social landlords, not just councils. So there will be housing associations, registered social landlords operating in all 22 local authority areas. And it's an issue of affordability across social housing rather than council housing per se. But Councillor Hooper, you are right, there are 11 stock retained local authorities. But just to be clear on that point, sorry if I've caused some ambiguity there.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Hooper, you want to come back in?
It'd be useful, Mike, to have that ambiguity dispelled by the time this goes back to Cabinet. So I think that could be a good addition to add to this report, because I think 11 of 22, when they relate to RSLs as well, I think is not a consistent measure. So we need a better measure. I've got two more very brief questions, if I may. The first one is about CapEx on new build. I just want to get an idea about how many of those dwellings, which we're pleased to see, are actually set in, and how many of them are at risk in the plan. So we got sites for them, do we know where they're going? And the last point, we talk about energy efficiency, and I'm just wondering whether this also includes energy generation. We have lots of roofs. Do we put solar on roofs? Are we looking at putting ground source heat pumps and perhaps even shared services on some of our larger buildings as well? Thank you.
Mike, if you're able to come back in response to that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the forward delivery programme on new build, they are within, we do have sites within our new Cardiff and Vale Housing Partnership. Those sites are either in council ownership, those sites are in council ownership. The plan also allows for sites to come forward that we currently don't know about, for example. So at the moment we're doing some work with some consultants looking at some housing owned land, some sites that potentially could be utilised possibly for modular accommodation, either new modular accommodation or resited modular accommodation. So that work is ongoing. But yes, in terms of the forward programme and the sites within the Cardiff and Vale Partnership, they are sites in our gift. In terms of your second question, so at the moment, each social landlord is currently undertaking something called target energy pathway work, which is required for WHQS 23 by 2027. Effectively, what that work entails is us taking a much more holistic approach in relation to retrofit measures, in relation to the council housing stock. So it's getting an understanding, I suppose, of what would work in a property in a particular location or of a particular property type. As members will be aware, WHQS 23 looks to ensure that local social housing achieves EPC A. In terms of the baseline, the tenant targeted energy pathway work will give us that baseline and will give us a more accurate indication of cost. In terms of the work that we've been doing to date, we've taken a fabric first approach to our energy efficiency measures. So as you will see from the housing business plan, things like EWI, IWI, etc. We are undertaking some solar PV work, but our view is that rather than have a scattergun approach to retrofit measures, we wish to take a whole house approach. We think that's better value for money, and allows us to project manage that work better in relation to the business plan. We have a number of pilot sites. So, for example, we've used battery storage on a number of our flatted blocks. And going back to the issue of affordability, we've also taken an approach as a council where we have used solar PV, that rather than the council taking perhaps a credit back off the energy supply back into the council, all of the benefit in those circumstances is going back to the tenants to increase that affordability that I mentioned earlier. Hopefully that answers your question, but happy to clarify or follow up on anything I may have missed.
Thank you very much, Mike. Councillor Anthony Ernest, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The 2 points I've got to make are very simple in comparison with our colleague Councillor Hooper. The first point I just want to make is that we've a huge increase in demand for council properties in the Vale of Glamorgan, and yet we hear that we're amongst the lowest rent requirements for tenants. So, you know, I think for many people, the very fact that we can offer rents that are way below the private sector rents would lead to a huge demand in further housing. That's a comment. It's not necessarily a solution, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. But my question really is about the money advice service. I was reading up about this only last night. Can you tell me why we cannot make the money advice service available to the private sector? Now, it's available to council tenants. It's an extremely useful service, and it gives them a much greater understanding of the benefits that are available to them and how they can meet those costs. And yet there are many people in the private sector who are, if not they're far more stretched in meeting their rentals. And I'm sure they would appreciate the use of the money advice service. And I'm just wondering, you know, it's a matter of policy whether council should not open the service up to the private sector. And I would ask that that could be put to Cabinet on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just clarify? Are you suggesting that the demand for council housing is driven by the rent level? Is that the question?
I'm suggesting that probably is a very good factor, but I don't have the evidence to prove it, of course.
Indeed. Mike, could I ask you to come in on that, please?
Yeah, in terms of demand, that is covered in our local housing market assessment, and clearly the adopted LHMA, and I think it's probably referred into a later report on this agenda in terms of where demand is being driven by. The issue for us as a local authority is that we've got over 7,000 people on the housing waiting list on Homes for You, and we're probably turning over 100, 150 void properties annually, and clearly there is a mismatch between the demand for those in extreme housing need and those in our temporary housing. You know, we have over 300 households in temporary accommodation waiting for housing. Those households are homeless. Clearly in the Vale of Glamorgan, private rentals are extremely high. They're outside of the reach of many of those families, although we do work very well with the private sector through our Vale Assisted Tenancy Scheme, whereby the council provides bonds and rents in advance in order to make private renting more affordable or in reach of some of those tenants. Just to pick up, I think, on a point that was made earlier around the rent as well, over, I think, or around 70, just over 70% of our tenants will be on some form of housing related benefit, whether that be in the form of housing benefit or universal credit. And of course, those housing costs, increased housing costs that we've mentioned, will be met by consequential increases in the welfare benefits for either housing benefit or universal credit. So on the point of what the demand issue, clearly we've got more people that are homeless than we have in terms of available accommodation, and whilst we've been increasing the amount of temporary accommodation, ultimately the only way to ensure that we improve the position in the Vale is to provide more affordable housing to sort of, and for as a council, one of the council priorities is to build more housing at pace and scale, which is what the business plan aims to support. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context. In terms of the issue around money advice, the money advice service is paid for out of tenants' rents, which is why it's only available to tenants, because it's their rent that is paying for that service. I know that colleagues in our housing benefits service and citizens' advice have been doing some work more recently about looking at ways that we can work more closely with citizens' advice to provide services together in relation to providing better advice and better solutions to those private sector tenants who also will be suffering from issues around affordability and cost of living. I'm not sure if Matt has a view in terms of the housing benefits and the work that our benefits colleagues do in the council that could clarify that.
Certainly our benefits team do some signposting wherever possible. They're very alive to the challenges that people on the phones have. I guess a couple of bit of context in some of the other areas that have been mentioned as well, and it's just the general lack of housing supply in the Vale, and some of that is driven. We've seen drive-in rents in the private sector. Now, haven't put any numbers in the budget for consultation that's about to go out, but the similar report last year, there'd been a sort of 18% year-on increase in private rents across the Vale of Glamorgan over 2 years, and that almost drives some of the demand that we're seeing in the HRA as well.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mike. Councillor Iannucci, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman, for those responses.
Thanks. I was just wondering, how much warning are we giving the residents, the tenants, that the rent will be increasing? So obviously this is coming to full council next week, but are we going to make sure that there's a sort of concerted effort to make sure that people are aware well in advance that their rents are changing?
Thank you, Councillor. Mike, I guess this is a question for you. And Mike,
Yes,
Mike, actually, while you're there, can I add something? So the report references a joint campaign to encourage landlords to encourage tenants to talk to their landlords if they're struggling or likely to struggle with financial hardship. When is that campaign going to happen? I think that ties in with Councillor Iannucci's question around timescales. And will the private sector be involved in that? Thank you.
Yeah, so the intention is that there be a joint campaign with Welsh Government. So Welsh Government will also be coming to contribute to that campaign. But in terms of the Vale response, I think I mentioned earlier our tenants newsletter, which we reinstituted probably about a year ago now. It's a quarterly newsletter. The last newsletter went out just before Christmas, I think it was. We will ensure that the next edition, which is due out in the spring, just before, hopefully just before April, there'll be a full package of support measures in that newsletter. That newsletter goes to every single council tenant, and we will be offering, as I say, the opportunity for any tenants finding any issues with regard to their rent payments to make contact with with us. In terms of notice, there's a statutory requirement on the local authority to provide a minimum of 2 months' notice to our tenants of the rent increase. Clearly, if council approves the rent increase, measures will be in place shortly after to write to our tenants, giving them as much advance notice as possible, but a minimum of 2 months.
Thank you very much, Mike. I don't see any other hands. Oh, Councillor Perry.
Am I on? There I can. Right, I've appeared. Yeah, I mean, I've only got 3 quick questions. One has been covered by Anthony Ernest, but a little figure for you. 83 MPs in Westminster earn more from rental income than the people paying rents in social housing. So I think we've got a problem in Westminster, and there seems to be a conflict of interest. So our MPs, including Rachel Reeves, need to look at themselves. So we've got a bit of a housing mess, quite clearly. As Anthony Ernest has pointed out, we're charging 37% less than the profiteering private landlords. But I've got 2 other outstanding questions which I'm hoping can be answered tonight. And the first one is, how much more are our partner social housing providers charging, and why? Because if we're cheaper than them, why are we cheaper than them? And the second question is, why is the rent from the most vulnerable in our society being used to provide new build when millions of pounds in S106 is being collected for this purpose?
Thank you, Councillor. Matt, do you want to come in on some of those?
I was going to ask if Mike could answer the first one.
I'll leave it to you to decide between you who's taking what.
I'm not sure. I certainly don't have to hand how much partners are charging, albeit I'm sure that's information we could gather. But historically, if there's a gap, when you have rent policy setting limits, that gap's unlikely to close, is it? But Mike will probably need to be able to say a few more words than me on it.
Yeah, so prior to this policy, the previous Welsh Government rent policy implemented rent bans, and landlords were able to charge within a lower and an upper limit. Clearly, different landlords have different business plans. They have different priorities and aspirations. So there is a variance. We will have the information in relation to average rent levels for RSL partners, and I can provide that together with the other information that members have asked for tonight, which I've not been able to provide, and I'll include that as well. In relation to council tenants being asked to pay for out of their rent council housing. Clearly, council housing is additionality to the Section 106 agreements that the local authority has in terms of private development, and as members will be aware, that will vary across the Vale, normally between 30 and 40% affordable housing requirement on certain sites. So it's additionality. Just to make members aware, the income obviously on our new build also contributes to our repairs, maintenance and investment on our existing stock as well. So those tenants who are paying their rent in the new properties, elements of their rent is also contributing to the cost of the existing stock as well. Our viability proposals for new build ensures that those new build properties pay back over 40 or 50 years, depending on the viability of a particular scheme. And of course, I would hope that the quality of the council housing we're building at the moment will ensure that those homes are still standing well past that viability threshold, and the income that we receive there, the debt provision will have been paid off on those properties, and the income we receive from rents, as I say, continues then to provide our revenue services to the rest of the HRA.
Do you want to come back in, Councillor?
Yeah, one quick follow-up question on new builds. I did see some figures, and I don't know how accurate they are, but those figures suggested that for the price of the Vale of Glamorgan building a one-bedroom flat, there are properties that are two-bedroom in the Vale of Glamorgan, which can be bought on the private market for less. So why are we spending so much on building new builds when we can buy from the private sector larger properties for less money?
Thank you, Councillor. Mike, I think you've already referenced the issue around quality and sustainability, but I'll let you respond to Councillor Perry's question.
Yeah, it's about clearly existing housing doesn't increase supply. It changes tenure potentially, but in terms of supply, it doesn't increase the supply of housing. So that is an important factor to sort of point out. But I would also indicate that the council is acquiring properties in the private sector, and again, we're spending, and our business plan has approximately, I think it's £1 million a year of acquisition available to us to purchase properties. Examples of which are new temporary housing scheme, which is going remarkably well at in Barry. We've just acquired another property in the Barry area, which will be refurbished to achieve WHQS prior to letting later in the year. So acquisition is an important part, but as I say, in terms of supply, it's about increasing the numbers rather than changing the tenure.
Thank you, Mike. I want to draw this debate to a close. Councillor William, you want to come in? Let's make that the last question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the only thing I wanted to come back on was the fact that with 5 of the most deprived areas, there's the bottom 10% or top 10%, of whichever way you look at it, featuring in the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation. Obviously, this increase of 4.3% will affect, the poorest and most vulnerable. Now, Councillor Iannucci did ask a question, and I just want to sort of follow on from that, really, from the answer given. In terms of these are the people that are going to face the greatest amount of hardship, what measures are we going to be putting in place to help them? That's why I'm a bit worried about this 4.3%. It's all very well saying, yeah, we can contact the council. Well, okay, well, when they do that, or if they do that, what can the council do to mitigate this?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I'll invite you back in if I may. You've already, I think, addressed some of that in terms of explaining the campaign that will be done to encourage tenants to talk to their landlords if they're struggling, and also the support that's available from the council. But if there's anything you want to add to the comments you've already made, please do, Mike.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier 70% of our tenants are on some form of either housing benefit or universal credit. They will be unaffected by the increase insofar as their housing costs will be met from within increases in their housing elements of their welfare benefits. The impact, I guess, will be and where the people around the margins, that is where you would see the impact, or potentially those in work. And again, as I've mentioned, our money advice services there at all stages for anybody that it feels that there are financial pressures which impact on their ability to pay rent. As I say, we also provide advice on a range of other financial increased income opportunities, whether that be benefit take-up, whether that be water tariffs, whether that be charitable organisations that are providing assistance and funding through utility costs, whether that be gas and electric. So there are a wealth of support services out there. And again, I will provide the trend analysis for Councillor Hooper, that Councillor Hooper's asked for, and for members. The vast majority, when asked, of our tenants that respond to our star survey, nearly 80% have indicated that they do find their rent affordable or very affordable. I guess you're right. It's those that are on the margins who may be struggling financially, that money advice should be targeted towards.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to draw this debate to a close and move to the recommendations. There are a number of recommendations within the report that are for Cabinet, and what we've been asked to do as committee is comment on those. So I'm not going to read them all in detail because they're before you in the report. Councillor Hooper, do you want to come in? I do want to close on this.
I realise you want to close, Chair, but I don't think the 4.3% is affordable for these people. So I'm proposing that goes back to Cabinet, and I'd like to suggest we have a vote on it tonight, on a recorded vote as well. Thank you.
So you're proposing it goes back to Cabinet. What does that mean? Can I just ask you to clarify that? Are you proposing an alternative increase, decrease? What are you specifically
a lower level? So the Welsh Government gives you a guideline, and it gives you a top amount that it can charge, and that top amount is what's been charged here. We have a higher surplus than we had last year, so I'm suggesting it goes back to Cabinet, back to Matt, through Matt and the team, with a review, with a focus on reducing it from 4.3% to something more affordable.
Okay, thank you. So I can see hands everywhere. We're going to take that recommendation and we're going to have a recorded vote on that recommendation. Do councillors then have other recommendations that they want to make subsequent to that?
I simply wanted a second. I would say I thought that was a sensible thing for us as a committee to ask Cabinet to do, to review it. I don't think there's any harm in that.
I thought I had my hand up first to second that, because inflation rate is only 3.5%, so that the 4.3 is 0.8% above inflation. So I wanted to second it.
Right, so we have a proposal before us that the recommendation that should go back to Cabinet from this committee is that there should be a review of the proposal to increase the rent by 4.3% with a view to reducing that level down. That's the recommendation that we're going to vote on, and it will be a recorded vote. Councillor Burnett, I can see you've got your hand up. We are moving to a voting committee. Was there a point of order that you wanted to make? No, in that case, we're going to move to a vote when the officers advise us that we're ready. Thank you.
Just to double check, Chair, we've got, in terms of wording on the vote, consider request the Cabinet consider a review to reduce the level of the rent increase, just as a summary. Is that sufficient? Or
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Right, we'll start the voting now, Chair.
Can I just ask you to explain the vote to those members that are joining us online in terms of what they'll see? Thank you.
Right, there should be an option that'll come up, Chair, to yes, no, or abstain in terms of the voting online. So hopefully everyone has voted now.
Thank you.
Just still having the votes coming through now, Chair. Right, we've got one not voted. Yeah, but oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, everyone has voted now, Chair, just to confirm.
And the outcome is?
We'll just bring that up now. The vote is currently tied, Chair. So as Chair, you will have the casting vote.
Thank you, committee. I would cast my vote against that recommendation on the basis that I think the report sets out very clearly the rationale for the 4.3%. So I have nothing more to add to that. Thank you.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'll just ask my colleague to bring up the names now. Bear with me a second. Okay, Chair. Because of that, obviously the motion isn't carried.
Thank you. So we come back to the recommendations that are in the report before us. I think we had recommendations around housing revenue account budget, rent increase I'll come back to, increase to service charges, the implementation process from the 1st of April, the housing revenue account business plan and use of urgent decision procedure to enable the final reports, etc., to be referred to full council. I think in terms of our debate, the only recommendations that I've pulled out refer to the rent increase. So my proposal would be based on that in relation to recommendation 3, the rent increase, this committee would ask that the report clarifies the affordability criteria set out in the report in relation to the proposed rent increases, and that information should also be included providing details of the average rent increase levels set by RSL partners to further clarify the rationale for the decision making around the level of rent increase that's being proposed in the Vale. Is there a seconder for that recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor Iannucci. Councillor Norman, I think you were coming in to second that as well. Thank you. If there's no dissent to that recommendation, then that recommendation will go forward from committee in relation to rent increases. Thank you, committee. I'm going to propose just a very short 5-minute break before we move on to the next agenda item. So we will reconvene at 23 minutes past 7.
Sorry, Chair, can I just double check? Is it just the one recommendation now that's gone back to cabinet?
Yes.
With reference to that?
Yes.
Okay, just double check for clarity. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, committee. It is 23 minutes past, so we will recommence. And we move on to agenda item 5, Vale Glamorgan Replacement Local Development Plan 2021 to...
So agenda item 4, Chair.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, of course. Revised Delivery Agreement and Green Infrastructure Strategy. This report is a reference from Cabinet, and we're joined by Ian Robinson, the Head of Sustainable Development, who will take us through it. Over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Let's wait for Matt to bring the slides up. Thanks, Matt. Right, you could pop to the next one, please. Thanks. So first, I'll just set out for context kind of where we are and how we got to this point. Just briefly, I think it was only a couple of months ago that we were in this scrutiny, so members will recall this, I'm sure. But just for completeness, the RLDP Sustainable Growth Strategy focuses development in a strategic growth area, those being the areas best served by public transport and where there are employment opportunities, services and facilities to reduce the need to travel. Next slide, please, Matt. Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Can you pop back? Thanks. Full Council initially approved the preferred strategy in September 2024, and that was to form the basis for the deposit plan, which is before members this evening. The total housing and employment requirements were included within, including the broad spatial distribution of growth. Key sites were agreed at St Athan, Roos and Dinas Powys, and a site at North East Barry, but as I'm sure members will be aware, following concerns relating to deliverability of the last of those, it was necessary to identify other sites in Barry to replace the site at North East Barry, west of Dinas Powys. And consequently, following a public consultation on options for other sites in Barry, at the beginning of December last year, Full Council approved the inclusion of an alternative key site at North West Barry, alongside smaller further allocations at Hayes Lane and Neptune Road. Thanks, Matt. So just a summary there, kind of what's gone before us and what's next. So matters considered and approved by Full Council already in September 24 and December 25. Level and amount of growth, that being in recognition of the Vale being in a national growth area in future Wales. The spatial distribution of that growth in the strategic growth area, those key sites and the additional allocations. And then I've just indicated here kind of the main points of the deposit plan, which seeks to now build upon those matters previously approved and agreed by Council, those being principally an additional allocation at Clive Road and St Athan, a number of rural affordable housing-led sites, rolled forward sites from the existing local development plan, employment and retail allocations, and the full scope of detailed planning policies, including some relating to net zero buildings, biodiversity, etc. Next slide, please, Matt. So the RLDP sets what we consider to be a sort of medium or moderate level of growth, that being just over 500 units per year, equating to just under 8,000 over the plan period. As members are aware, when we go to examination with a plan, we have to demonstrate a necessary level of flexibility in the allowance in case there are any issues with other allocated sites, and that growth level, as noted just now, has been endorsed by Full Council. That slide there shows the makeup of the units that are still to be delivered on top of existing commitments or completions from the start of the plan period. The largest of those being the key sites, other new housing allocations, which comprise Clive Road that I just referred to, Hayes Lane and Neptune Road, rolled forward sites from the existing development plan that are considered to continue to be appropriate allocations within the new plan, and those affordable housing led sites that I referred to. So this is a plan there to indicate the site at Clive Road in St Athan. I think there's been circulated a number of representations received in relation to that site there. That's a site that was the subject of an item to Cabinet it was in December, wasn't it? Relating to the potential for the council to form an agreement with a developer to bring forward the units on that site. And the slide there just refers to the others at Hayes Lane and Neptune Road, which I haven't got plans of here, but those were subject of detailed discussion at the last meetings. So in terms of affordable housing delivery, there is, as we heard from Mike just now as well, very high levels of affordable housing need across the Vale, and the Deposit RLDP sets a target to deliver just over 3,000 affordable homes over the planned period. It's worth highlighting again, as per previous discussions, that doesn't deal with the total affordable housing need in the Vale across the planned period, but it's what can be achieved in the context of the level of growth proposed. The adopted LDP target of 30 to 40% affordable housing on sites by private developers has been retained, and that's kind of the subject of viability testing to make sure that sites are delivering as much affordable housing as they can alongside other kind of infrastructure and Section 106 requirements. The plan allocates affordable housing-led sites in rural area where there needs to be a minimum of 50% affordable units, but just to stress that is a minimum, so those sites could come forward for 100% affordable housing. That's in response to feedback through previous consultations from stakeholders and identified affordable housing need in those areas. There are plans on the following slides, but they relate to Wick, Pwyllgor, Aberthin and Colwinston. In addition, the policies in the deposit plan support the provision of exception sites in appropriate locations as well. The last note there, just to say that both rural affordable housing led sites and affordable housing exception sites would be subject to local lettings policies. And I think I recall that they were the subject of an item on the last place scrutiny as well. So the plan includes details of these sites, but just for members' clarity here this evening, you've got Wick on the left-hand side. So that site relates physically closely to relatively recent new residential development in Wick, and the one on the east is directly adjacent to an allocation that formed part of Colwinston in the existing local development plan. The site on the left is Pwyllgor. Members may be aware that there is a relatively recently completed affordable housing scheme in Pwyllgor, which was approved kind of under the terms of the rural exception site policy in the existing local development plan. And finally, there's Aberthin on the right-hand side. Thanks, Matt. Just to touch upon infrastructure, again, this formed quite a key part of discussions when we met in November. An infrastructure delivery plan forms part of the deposit plan, identifying what infrastructure is needed to deliver sites and mitigate the impacts of developments. The plan is informed and supported by a strategic transport assessment, which consider cumulative impacts on the highway network and identify key junction improvements, such as at Waycott Cross. There will, of course, be requirements to contribute to sustainable transport and active travel, education where there is identified need as a consequence of the development and an absence of capacity in existing schools. We continue to engage with the health board and will undertake regular reviews and consider opportunities to increase capacity. And the final note there just relates to water and sewerage, and noting that developments will be required to support infrastructure improvements in those areas where existing planned improvements from the statutory undertaker won't provide enough capacity. In terms of employment, the deposit plan identifies 182 hectares of new employment land to meet a need of just under 68 hectares. Sorry, let me go back to that. Can you clarify the number?
So the supply is 182. The need for the
yeah, sorry. So, a total supply of 182 hectares to meet a need for just under 68 and providing for up to 5,338 jobs. Members should be familiar with existing major sort of strategic employment allocations forming part of the existing LDP at Cardiff Airport and Brotathen Enterprise Zones and south of Junction 34. Further local employment allocations are identified at Atlantic Train Estate, Windmill Park and Llandow, and obviously a number of existing employment sites principally within our main settlements are protected for continued employment use. Finally, 2 employment regeneration opportunity areas are identified at Barry Docks and the former Aberthorpe Power Station site. In terms of retail and town centres, the deposit plan makes provision for new food stores at St Athan as part of one of the key sites, and at Lantrip Major, although that is subject to a call-in request from Welsh ministers at the moment, and the timeline surrounding that is probably fair to say uncertain. So obviously, as that develops and if that changes in the context of the next stages of the plan period, then we will potentially have to reappraise whether that's appropriate to retain that allocation. There's a recognition that the function of town centres is changing, and the policy approach advocated is to support the vitality and vibrancy of town centres as, you know, the principal aim. It's no longer about kind of protecting one kind of strict retail function at all costs. It's about the appropriate mix of uses to make our town and commercial centres as vibrant as possible. So the policies are moving towards a slightly more flexible approach compared to existing LDP policies. And we're seeking to set thresholds in respect of an overconcentration of hot food takeaways in recognition of potential health impacts and also the amenity and vibrancy of town centres. So the plan includes innovative policies in respect of the climate emergency and trying to ensure that our new housing does as much as it can to address these issues. There will be requirements for dwellings to be built to net zero carbon in operation. We consider that these standards have been demonstrated through the viability work so far to be feasible and financially viable. At the moment, we are awaiting the outcome of Welsh Government's review of where to go with building regulations, and there are some options they are considering which would potentially have different implications for costs for building new dwellings. So, subject to the outcome of that, we will have to kind of review how that sits with the policies just to establish that they are still viable and kind of deliverable. In addition to carbon emissions benefits, this approach will reduce energy costs for residents and help address fuel poverty. And we're seeking to instill a stronger presumption against development of buildings unless certain criteria are met. So we don't want a policy context where it's very easy to demolish a building unless it has a kind of a statutory designation that protects it, where possible retaining buildings of character and recognising, you know, the embodied carbon and the importance of keeping existing building stock where that is a better option for the environment. So next steps, the report recommends that the deposit, RLDP and its supporting documents be approved for public consultation. And I think that's clear in the report to Cabinet as well, but I just wanted to kind of stress that fact that we're seeking to go out for public consultation to understand the views of a wide range of stakeholders, you know, obviously importantly including all of our communities affected by these developments. The purpose of the report to Cabinet previously and to scrutiny tonight and to full council is not to ask for the deposit plan to be approved. It is to seek approval to go out on consultation to let us know the full scope of stakeholder views, opinions, comments, any concerns, and how we can address those through the following periods. Any comments from this scrutiny committee this evening would be due to be considered by Cabinet next week before full council later next week. We recognise that it is a relatively condensed timeline, and we appreciate members' availability and time in considering this. The delivery agreement, as you will note, is sought to be amended alongside this as a consequence of some of the changes we've had to make in respect to the Barry sites. But the timeline and the expectations on councils with writing our new development plans is quite exacting and tight. So we do need to keep to this timeline, and that's why kind of this part of the process is relatively condensed. As I noted then, Council will also be asked to approve the revised delivery agreement for submission to Welsh Government for their approval. Following that, if approved by full Council for consultation purposes, the plan would be on consultation for a statutory 6-week period between late January and the 11th of March to allow interested parties to make further representations on all policies and proposed allocations. Following that, the results and our response to the consultation would be reported back through a similar process to what we're doing now, Cabinet and Scrutiny and full Council, ultimately with the aim of getting sufficient consensus to go to examination with an independent planning inspector from PEDU on the full deposit plan. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. I know the responsible cabinet member, Councillor Ruba Sivignan, is with us tonight. I believe she is. Ruba, yeah. Do you want to add anything, Councillor? Thank
you. Thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't really want to cover any of the details. I think Ian's done a good job of that. This report really represents, a milestone in this whole process. In terms of, producing the deposit replacement local development plan. And just to remind members, this is about the next part of this process, which is, sending this deposit plan out for further consultation, along with the green infrastructure strategy and the sustainable growth strategy. So there is more opportunity for members and members of the public, obviously, to comment on this. So this is the next formal stage, and it does detail the planning policy framework, because we need to address the Vale's key challenges going forward. There is a need for affordable housing. We need to respond to climate change and nature emergencies, and also participate in the placemaking and improving health and well-being of all our residents. So this is what the deposit plan is about. And I just to assure members that before the Christmas recess, this report was sent to all members, I think around the 15th of December, and members were invited to contact Victoria and her team with any issues they had. And I know that both Councillor Haynes and Councillor Perry did contact the team, and on a number of occasions. So they have this whole process has been, I feel, very sort of open and transparent, and available for people to comment. So I do hope that members this evening will support this report and the plan going forward to further consultation, so that we can have a deposit plan, have an updated local development plan by the end of the year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to remind committee that we've received written representations on the report from a number of individuals and groups, and all of those have been made available to members in advance of tonight's committee meeting, so that we can consider those along with the report before us. We're also joined by a member of the public, Emma Reid, who's registered to speak. Thank you for your patience, Emma. Please do go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I've collected comments from Roos residents on the proposed new developments. I'm here today to object to the plan's proposed residential development off Readers Way in Roos because it does not deliver the much already needed green and transport infrastructure. Roos has become a town without the facilities that planned towns like Barry, Penarth, Cowbridge and Lantwick Major have. Roos has experienced high levels of residential development with no supporting infrastructure. Roos does not even have its own secondary school, with children over 11 having to be bussed out of the village, east or west, every day. Previous promises of golf courses, all-weather sports facilities, 2 trains per hour, shops, buses and better road transport infrastructure have failed to be delivered or properly managed by this council. There are still no firm plans for improvements in this plan, meaning people will choose the car to travel, defeating the plan's objectives. It seems the council does not care about Roos. Large new housing sites should be built within or adjoining the main 4 towns to support their town centres and existing public transport. Or the council could get novel and consider building a new town with proper infrastructure. Together with this draft plan's housing allocation of some 520 units immediately adjoining Roos is a 2,000 student college under construction, Wales's fastest growing regional airport, a possible regional industrial development at Model Farm and also at Aberthorpe Power Station, plus another 400 houses committed at Roos Point. I ask this committee to challenge what is the accompanying improved transport and flooding infrastructure for these developments. These developments will use just one road east to Waycott Cross, with high fatal accident statistics and no active travel. Waycott Cross junction is over capacity, tailing back regularly to the airport from both St Athan and Roos. Yet this draft plan has further proposals for more houses at Waycott Cross, as well as Roos. The draft plan talks of improvements to the Waycott Cross junction, but its location surrounded by development means that improvements would be costly and challenging and likely not achievable. The council has also previously insinuated that infrastructure needed by new housing is the responsibility of others, although it does try to ask for some developer contributions. After viability considerations, these are never enough to deliver the much needed infrastructure. There have been previous draft proposals for a new link road from the Airport Dragon's Tail roundabout to connect with 5 Mile Lane, thereby passing the Waycott Cross junction. Such a scheme must happen as part of any new developments in Roos or St Athan. I feel that successive administrations have let Roos residents down, and I would ask this committee to review carefully the transport and flooding infrastructure to be provided as part of any development proposed by this plan. Committee, I ask you not to rush this important decision. Your views on this decision are really important. And once it's a deposit plan, despite what's been said here this evening, it is really difficult to change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just to remind committee members, you can't ask Emma any questions, but you can ask for any points of clarification in relation to anything that's been said tonight. Are there any points of clarification from committee members? Councillor Perry.
Your proposed new road to link to 5 Mile Lane, that would see more traffic going up through the A48 villages and Culverhouse Cross?
I'm not sure that's a point of clarification.
Well, I want to clarify where that traffic's going to go to the new road.
It's not a question for Emma. It's a question that you might want to raise as part of the debate, but I think it's not for Emma. I don't see any other hands, so thank you, Emma. You're very welcome to stay for the debate. And now moving on to non-committee members. Are there any non-committee members who want to speak on this issue? I think a number have already registered in advance. I'm going to take those non-committee members who advised us before committee that they wanted to speak. So we'll start with Councillor Haynes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee. I think back in 2022, we were asked to decide how housing growth would be distributed in the Vale. Several options were considered, but the planning team recommended that areas with good public transport should take more housing. That recommendation was adopted. However, I asked members to note that St Athan currently has 1 bus an hour, and that service does not link with train services from Lantern Major to an integrated timetable. By any reasonable standard, this does not amount to good public transport. Excuse me. When the draft local development plan was published, St Athan was shown as having a train station. That has since been rebranded to a potential train station. Despite this, the document repeatedly refers to St Athan railway station and also to a feasibility study undertaken in 2022. What the document fails to mention is the key conclusion of that study, that a further feasibility study was required. Myself and former MP Alan Cairns campaigned and secured funding for the UK government for that study. However, that funding is not forthcoming from the current Labour administration. I've also read correspondence between Councillor Burnett and Transport for Wales, which clearly states that Transport for Wales has no plans for a stop at St Athan or a station. So let us be clear. There is no further feasibility study. There is no support for from Transport for Wales. Therefore, there is no train station. The administration and officers are aware of this, which is why the narrative has shifted from a train station to a so-called transport interchange. Yet even now, the document still contains an image showing a train station at St Athan. There is also no clear plan for the bus service at this interchange. And before anyone raises 106 money, 106 monies, I remind members that 106 monies exist to mitigate the impact of development on local communities, not to justify development decisions after the fact. We have therefore moved from justifying over 1,200 houses on the basis of a train station to justifying over 1,200 houses on the basis of a car park. The second justification put forward is employment. This argument was used previously to support large-scale developments in St Athan with claims of 10,000 jobs. Those jobs did not materialise. As a result, St Athan already has sufficient housing for both existing and potential employment. Turning to social housing now, members will have seen the email I circulated when I wrote to Councillor Burnett about social housing in St Athan. And St Athan has delivered a significant amount of social housing. There is no evidenced need for more. Continuing to concentrate social housing here risks placing families used to urban services into a community that lacks facilities. Finally, I want to address the Clive Road site directly. This is the last undeveloped parcel land around this unadopted estate of East Vale. It has been used as an informal community open space for decades. I personally remember playing football on it over 50 years ago. In practice, it functions as a village green. I find it troubling that the 5 ways of working appear not to apply to the residents of East Vale, and that their children may lose access to green space forever. Also, I remind members that this site lies close to an active runway, and that aircraft incidents have occurred nearby in the past. This site should never have been included in any plan. Therefore, I ask the committee for 3 things. First, to reject this document and require that all inaccuracies and misleading information are corrected before it returns. And remember, if potential infrastructure can justify developments in St Athan, it will be used to justify developments in other wards. Secondly, to ensure that any development in the Flemmixon ward, and to be clear, this ward includes East Vale, Eglwys Brewis and Park Fern Wen, includes community facilities and at least 1 shop. Now, a shop was mentioned earlier by the officer, and that shop is to be in St Athan Village. Now, I urge you to look at a map and see the distance between East Vale and St Athan Village. On a rainy night, needing a bottle of milk, I think it's a little far to expect. This community needs a shop. And thirdly, to remove the Clive Road site from the list of candidate sites. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to bring in Councillor Hennessy, who also pre-registered his wish to speak, and then
Yeah,
Ian.
just let me stop my phone from going off. Sorry.
Can you put
Technology is a good thing when you want it to work.
Can you put yourself on silent while you do that, please, Councillor?
Yes.
Thank you. And then once we've heard from Councillor Hennessy, Ian, I'll ask you to respond to the points that have been made so far, and then we'll bring in the other non-committee members. Thank you. Councillor Hennessy, are you ready to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Like Emma Reid, Councillor Bruce and myself, Emma Reid, Councillor Bruce and myself have asked residents what questions they would like us to ask at this meeting today. So these are the questions residents would like us to ask you. You were saying that residents would be able to walk from Reader's Way to the train station within 10-15 minutes. I don't know who you are, but I know for a fact that I can't do it and residents can't. You were also saying that the children will be able to go to the schools. I know for a fact that Roos Primary School is totally at capacity, and South Point School is almost at capacity. So where will the children go? The catchment school for comprehensive is Cowbridge. And to my knowledge, that is at capacity as well. And so is Whitmore, and so is Lantwick Major. So where will the children go? The other questions I was asked to ask, and like Councillor Bruce, and the question was, the acclimation ponds, what will be built on the Reader's Whale site, will be maintained. Who will maintain them and who will do this? They will clog. Who will fix this problem? Once this property is handed over to the council, the roads and all these ponds, will the council maintain them? As they know, whoever lives in Reader's Way, this is a high flood risk area. Who will be maintaining all these flood risk areas? Because I know the developers won't. And like Councillor Haynes, everyone says that we have excellent local access travel. Rubbish. I catch the bus quite regularly to Roos, and like anyone who knows Roos, there's a bus every hour. And sometimes these buses don't turn up. We have 2 doctor's surgeries in Roos. Where will the patients go? If these are full, they either have to go to Ella Road Surgery in Lantwick Major or to West Key Medical Centre in Barry. For elderly people who don't travel, who don't have cars, and who can't catch these buses, what don't exist all the time, how will they get their appointments? Like Councillor Haynes, I highly wish that this gets removed from the RLDP. Thank you. And sorry for my phone going off.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Ian, are you able to respond to some of those points briefly, please? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to come back on the points and give commentary which I think kind of supplements and supports what we discussed last time. I just want to make the point that where we are now is the result of a number of stages of initially phases of kind of informal engagement and then formal reporting through various committees of the council and public consultation exercises and consultations with statutory and other bodies. And we're at the point where full council has voted to include these key sites within the plan. What we are seeking to do now in consultation on the deposit plan is to build on that with more detail. But there are certain things which have been through very rigorous scrutiny and very rigorous consultation and debate already. And I personally, I think I need to flag that point because a lot of the comments and things we'll come back on relate to kind of matters of principle about the key sites that have been through a lot of debate and a lot of consideration. And this isn't designed to be an opportunity to revisit decisions made a month or two ago, in my view. But coming to those points, because I think it's important to give them context. Obviously, these sites sit within the deposit plan that we are putting forward for comment. So they merit further attention again. in terms of Roos, I think when I discussed it at the scrutiny a couple of months ago, I referred to sustainability as being kind of not binary and being a sort of sliding scale, if you like, and that we would always wish to allocate land in the very most sustainable locations. Now we are looking at a replacement local development plan after our existing LDP, after a unitary development plan, after plans before that, and understandably the most sustainable sites, sites like Barry Waterfront, have appeared in existing and previous plans. And undeniably, it does become more difficult each time we look at a plan to find sites with, if you like, equal sustainability credentials as the ones that have gone before. Nevertheless, the housing crisis hasn't gone away. We still sit within a national growth area within national policy, and we have to deliver a plan that's consistent with national policy, and we have to deal with our housing issues, amongst other things. So we need to look at what are the best sites that come before us. And I recognise and would agree that Roos is not as sustainable a settlement as Barry. But nevertheless, Roos is one of the Vale's more sustainable settlements. It has a train station, it has a good range of facilities, and that needs to be weighed against those pressing issues that I've just referred to. That's what formed the basis of the debate previously, and I recognise that there was a lot of competing views given by members at this committee and full council, and not everybody shares the same view on what is a sustainable site or what is a sufficiently sustainable site. But in the context of all of the issues we're trying to deal with, environmental issues, our housing crisis, mitigating traffic, we continue to feel that this is a sufficiently sustainable site. Nothing has changed since 2 months ago to make it less sustainable, and it was considered by council to be a sustainable site in September previously, and when the vote happened 2 months ago. Schools, yes, as we've talked about before, there will be a requirement for developers to supplement capacity where that need is generated from developments. We can't, as much as we might want to, we can't use this replacement local development plan to allocate a new settlement. That can only be done through the strategic development plan. So it's an option that has come up before. I think other members of the council through various stages have asked us to consider Llandau as an example, but we can't do that here. We have to look at allocations within and adjoining existing settlements. Waycott Cross, there was quite a lot of debate about that previously. I don't agree with the speaker's comments about things not being achievable and not being deliverable. Where we are now, the work that's been done strategically on transport impacts and with the transport consultant tells us that we feel we can be effectively mitigating the traffic and transport impacts, as I said last time, and that remains the case. I don't think building a new road and simply encouraging that level of kind of additional car capacity is the right response. I know that's been Welsh Government's position on new roads. Not least, the developments wouldn't support, they couldn't possibly viably support delivery of a whole new road. So I don't think that's the appropriate option in any case. As I said before, we're looking to go out on consultation, and that consultation would be accompanied by a lot of background documents, and that's why there's a 6-week period for doing that. I realise that members have been faced with what seems like a lot of information to consider before tonight's meeting. I just want to say it's not 900 pages of a development plan. It's not 900 pages of a report. There's a lot of appendices at the back there, technical documents, plans and other things, which, yes, they support the plan and they're relevant, but I don't think there needs to be an expectation for members to have read every word of 900 pages in order to allow us to progress to a public consultation, which is essentially what we're asking for. Just moving to Councillor Hennessy. I'll refer to Councillor Hennessy's comments before Councillor Haynes, just because it goes alongside Roos. We feel that the distance to the train station is perfectly walkable. As I said before, not for everyone. We recognise not everybody can make a journey on foot to a train station, and we can't cater for the abilities of every single resident. But it's a reasonable and very much a viable option. drainage infrastructure, roads, open spaces, they can be retained by developers to be managed privately, or they can be transferred to councils with appropriate commuted sums. In terms of Councillor Haynes' comments, I mean, the points of principle remain. The sites in St Athan have had the same level of scrutiny, the same level of publicity, consultation, debate and assessment as the site in Roos, and their status in terms of previous council debate and previous council resolutions is the same. I don't think it would be appropriate to revisit now the principle of those. I understand Councillor Haynes' views and have done since the start of this process in relation to the train station. It's a complex issue. It's affected by a number of things, not least, as Councillor Haynes noted, potentially different political administrations and what they see as being priorities at a central government level. In my opinion, there is a positive context to this in terms of the identification of feasibility money previously and potentially more feasibility money now. To deliver a train station is a complicated thing, and there needs to be a business case for it. Now, modelling and business case work that was done previously by TfW supports the view that these allocations can justify a train station at St Athan, but there needs to be enough critical mass of development to justify a station. Now, as I've said before, we've got ambitious and positive aspirations for the region. These sites that we're looking to allocate in St Athan sit adjacent to strategic and potentially, certainly regionally and nationally important employment enterprise zones, and it's not just about the train station, it's about allocating housing next to those employment opportunities. But these allocations can also provide new retail opportunities that don't exist in St Athan, community and education facilities potentially as well. In order for a train station to stand a chance, there has to be a business case for it, and if in the absence of allocating new development and making that business case, there really is, in my view, no chance of a train station. So the one has to come before the other in order for us to lobby and justify funding and eventually a station in St Athan. There needs to be adequate business case for it, and we need to build that case by promoting the importance and promoting the function and the role of St Athan within the region, and we think that is the right approach for this. We don't want the Vale to be all about the southeast. The other settlements in the Vale, in the Mid and Western Vale, have an important role to play in what the Vale does in the region. I think that covers it as far as my notes can see, Chair. So I'll shut up now and go back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So really helpful just to remind members that the decisions that have been approved by full council can't be revisited within this timescale. So if members can just bear that in mind, that will help us in terms of our consideration of the report. Councillor Franks, please.
Thank you. I think many will consider that this replacement LDP was fatally flawed when the case for 900 houses leading to possibly 1,200 plus houses off Argyle Lane totally collapsed. Now, this was not a bolt out of the blue. Cabinet and Council were warned that this site was totally unsuitable. As usual with this administration, warnings are ignored, and in the end, it resulted in a humiliating climb down. So you had to scramble around to fill the gap, and again focused on unsuitable sites, including Northwest Barry off Port Road. Turning now to a particular site, namely Northeast Dinas Powys in Eastbrook, the public are incredulous that this site is considered suitable for 250 houses, and that there is concern that this is simply the thin edge of the wedge, and further fields towards Llandoch Hospital will be next in line. The proposed car access onto Cardiff Road, the A4055, is staggering. This road must be one of the most congested in the whole of the Vale, leading to one of the busiest sets of traffic lights in the area. Currently, the schools are all full, with, for instance, St Cyrus Secondary School oversubscribed by 100%. Primary schools throughout Penarth and Dinas Powys also have little or no spare capacity. Healthcare is at a premium in this area. The local medical centre in Dinas Powys is under huge pressure, made worse by the transfer of well over 1,000 patients from Penarth and Grangetown. Nothing in these proposals addresses this vital aspect. Then we come to transport. The nearest train station is remote from much of this site and fails a sustainable, travel objects loudly proclaimed by this authority. In addition, no additional bus services are proposed. This site will be very, very much car focused. We were flooded in Dinas Powys just over, well, around 5 years ago. No work of a substantial nature has been undertaken to improve the situation regarding the rivers, and people are concerned. There are proposals to have floodgates for some properties, but when it comes to work undertaken to the rivers, nothing has been done. So I consider that this whole plan is unacceptable and should be withdrawn. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to bring in Councillor Campbell next, and Ian, then I'll come to you to respond. Thank you. Councillor Campbell, please.
Hello. I can talk about Roos and the sites that are there and our lack of infrastructure and everything until I'm blue in the face. But I believe that Emma and my fellow ward councillors have already done that this evening, and I think Ian is probably going to be battered with other councillors doing that as well for their own wards. But what I want to talk about is in regards to the actual plan itself and the accountability for the infrastructure and everything else that needs to go in place. So the health board came to a recent scrutiny meeting that I sit on and spoke about their plans going forward. When I questioned them about the timescales of things that are going to be put in place, they couldn't give me a timescale. They couldn't give me actually anything tangible going forward about things that they were going to put in place in the Vale, especially when I spoke to them about the RLDP. We've spoken about developers, it being the developer's responsibility to put any infrastructure that would be needed in place in regards to roads and stuff like that. I understand we're going further and further down in this process now, and you know, you can have whatever opinions you want about the infrastructure in regards to if it's there, if it's not, when you're looking at this plan, but there is going to be further infrastructure needed. There is going to be further facilities needed, whether they're there or not at the moment. Where is the accountability? There's nothing in this plan about, you know, if there is a plan B, if these things do fail. So what happens then? That's what I want to know. What happens if the developer doesn't do this? What happens if the money doesn't come to fruition? Because we've seen multiple times over, developers aren't giving their way. You know, we've seen it on the waterfront, we've seen it in the Pwyllgor estate, where things just aren't coming through. Money isn't coming. You know, the roads aren't being built. So what happens then when we've got all these people moving into areas where there isn't sufficient things there isn't sufficient facilities, there isn't sufficient roads or active travel that we've promised these people? Where do we go from here?
Thank you, Councillor. Ian, can you pick up those points, please? Thank you.
Of course, thanks, Chair. I mean, much of what Councillor Frank said, I think I've covered in previous points, so I won't go over that. There's just a couple of brief points. I think for the sake of accuracy, in terms of the North East Barry Argyle Lane site, as members have previously been advised, there were deliverability issues there relating to the number of landowners, and as a consequence of that, technical matters, including highways work, weren't progressed as much as would have needed to be the case. That doesn't mean it was a fundamentally wrong site. There was good reason in our view why that could have been a positive site, providing a really good mix of uses, but there were technical and deliverability reasons why that couldn't go forward. So I don't see that fatally affects the plan or the need to move on to other sites in Barry. I struggle with the statement about the train station because I don't think that site could be much closer. I think it's a highly sustainable site, and I fundamentally disagree with that comment. Flood issues in Dinas Powys, not caused by this site, this bit of land. So I don't see the direct link between this allocation and pre-existing flood issues on other parts of the village. And just in terms of Councillor Campbell, again, some of the points covered. In terms of the Health Board, as I said, there remains an ongoing dialogue with the Health Board, and we look for opportunities where we can to improve on capacity. The planning process, the development plan process, and residential developments has never been able to replace the role and function of the Health Board in meeting the needs of its population. And there's a lot of viability work ongoing at the moment to establish that when these sites come forward as planning applications, if the plan is adopted, that they are sites that can deliver the necessary infrastructure in accordance with our policies. Our policies have never been that the whole of enhancements to local health infrastructure are borne by these developments, and there is only so much viability that developments can bring. There's affordable housing needs, there's education, there's community facilities, there's sustainable transport, there's public open space, amongst other things. And we are working as hard as we can with the Health Board to identify where there might be capacity issues and where sites might be able to assist with that. But we've always maintained that goes alongside the Health Board working to identify their need and doing what they can to address that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Franks, could you put your hand down, please? Your hand is still up on screen. Thank you. Councillor Anne Asprey, please.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I am speaking tonight as a Dinas Powys councillor and will support my fellow councillor, Chris Franks. I am also a member of Dinas Powys Community Council, where the RLDP has been a topic for conversation with the whole community council. Originally, there were 2 allocated sites proposed within the Dinas Powys ward, but the site of Argyle Lane was removed at an earlier point following criticisms of the plans. However, there were still concerns relating to the 250 house allocated site to the east of Dinas Powys. In allocating sites, I am aware that some of the impacts are outside the powers of the council, but these are relevant to both the current and future residents. It should also be recognised that Dinas Powys has had substantial development during the existent LDP, with housing at the former St Cyrus School, a school which we lost, and near Brynydon, as well as Caerleon Road area. The location of this allocated site on the far east of Dinas Powys is not a logical extension to the village. Instead, it faces towards Cardiff and is distant from many of the facilities that you would expect in an urban area. The site would rely on single vehicle access from Cardiff Road, which has indeed been flooded at the northernmost limits of the village. Safe and accessible pedestrian and cycle linkages from the site would be extremely limited, as Cardiff Road has restrictions on its width at the northern end. As a result, good pedestrian walkways and sufficient width to accommodate those using mobility aids or with pushchairs is unlikely to be capable of being provided. We have previously asked for a lift at Eastbrook train station, as residents with mobility issues are unable to easily cross the railway line to access services towards Barry and Bridgend, or to return from Cardiff. Active travel should be for all. There are other services needed to support additional residents, for example, doctors, GP surgeries, and dentists. Recently, Dinas Powys had to accept an extra 1,000 plus patients from Penarth when surgery closed. We cannot continue to have more residents with reduced levels of service. I recognise that this is out of the hands of the Vale Council, but it remains a material consideration. In recent years, since 2020, Dinas Powys had been plagued by recurring flooding and on Cardiff Road, as I said previously, and the addition of new housing raises concerns about worsening this situation. We are concerned that the development could prejudice future proposals to mitigate existing flood risks, indicating that the adjoining area could be suitable for riparian woodland planting potential. Whether this will still be effective if the adjoining land were developed for housing is unclear. Many are still waiting for flood defences to be added to their homes, and we would need to be persuaded that this will not worsen by building 250 houses in a village in this location. Our village is full, in my opinion. I ask that councillors consider the removal of the site from the RLGP in front of you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll bring in Councillor Gwyn John, please, next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm not a member, as you know, of the committee, but I'd just like to raise an issue on the retail sites, as mentioned tonight. Now, Ian mentioned tonight the retail site at Lambeth Major would be the Lidl site, which is based in Landmace, which is part of the county ward. But in the document that I read last week, it said that this site, if the Welsh Government refuse it, it would be a green wedge. There's no mention of that site being a retail site. The document that I read on this LDP was Boverton was to be a retail site. So I can't really understand where this comes from. Because, yes, I understand that if the Welsh Government give permission, then that building goes ahead. But that doesn't make it our retail site. And the basic is, where has Boverton gone? So quite simply, we're not already thinking, oh yeah, we'll cover this one up. The Welsh Government got to decide. And it's in Landmace Parish, which is a rural area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I can see some committee members have got their hands up. Please be assured I will come to you, but at the moment we're still taking non-committee members first. I'm going to take Councillor George Carroll and then I'll come to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I rise to speak against the proposed document before us this evening. To put things bluntly, Madam Mayor, the latest stage of the RDLP looks rushed.
Councillor Carroll, forgive me for interrupting you and forgive me for being pedantic. I'm not the Mayor. I'm the Chair of this committee. So you're addressing me as Madam Mayor and I'm Chair, just to clarify that point. Thank you.
My apologies, Chair. Thinking back to old times. Yes, as I was saying, Chair, I have serious concerns regarding the RDLP process, particularly the stage that is before the committee this evening. It looks rushed, and there's a simple reason for that, Chair, and that's because it is. Members have not been given sufficient time to digest the information before us in sufficient detail. And while I appreciate what has been said about the fact that there are certain things that perhaps some members may not necessarily need to read, I do think that in practice it's important that we are across everything, because there are, in large documents, always the potential of things being hidden, things that are relevant that only upon closer inspection start to stand out. And that's why there needs to be sufficient time for proper scrutiny to take place. Councillors Hennessy and Haynes made very valid points regarding the sites in St Athan and Roos and the lack of appropriate infrastructure and services in those areas, as did the Dinas Powys councillors who spoke regarding the site to the east of Dinas Powys. I too have many concerns about this site, Chair, in my capacity as the ward member for Landock. As an elected member, I frequently receive correspondence regarding the Mary Harrier junction, issues relating to capacity, road safety, and potential dangers for motorists and pedestrians. These concerns have not to date been addressed adequately, despite several measures being considered. And it's deeply concerning to me that a further development on Cardiff Road, not far from this site, is included within the RDLP plan. In my view, there is a significant risk that the increased traffic onto the road that this development will bring will exacerbate those problems at that junction, potentially making road safety matters even worse, affecting both Landock and other neighbouring communities too. It's quite clear to me from the comments that have been expressed by both members of the public and other members of this committee that there are serious flaws within the RDLP. We need to stop, go back again. This document, as things stand, is not in a position to go out for consultation. If we do consult on the RDLP, as has been proposed or is being proposed, the public are not going to give it a thumbs up. There are going to be significant concerns expressed. So it's better to get this right, drop what has been done to date, and for the process to begin so that the interests of all our communities can be taken into account and furthered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I bring you in, I do want to make a statement in response to the point that's been made a number of times about the volume of papers that are before us. I just want to reassure members of the public who might be listening to this that as the chair of this committee, I always read the papers that are presented to committee, and I'm aware that other councillors who are members of this committee do the same. So I think it's important that members of the public understand that we do take our responsibilities serious in relation to the issues that come before us. I'm going to, is it a point of order? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor, do you want to come in?
Yeah, if I may come in, how many hours did it take you to read the 980 pages plus that were circulated? Because there's more than 980. The document of 980 pages, how many hours did it take you to read through that in detail and scrutinise it?
I think, Councillor, I don't think I have to respond to that, but I'm going to. It took as long as it took. When papers come before me, I make sure that I put the time aside in what is a busy life that many of us have to ensure that I do the papers full justice before I come to committee. And I do want to reassure members of the public in relation to that point. But now I'll pass back over to Ian, if I may, to respond to the specifics. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. From Councillor Asbury, the point I'd pick out that I haven't already covered, probably worth adding in respect of flood risk. There's no fundamental flood risk areas on that site. New developments on any of these sites would have to demonstrate through technical submissions alongside planning applications that the specific development layout, etc., works and doesn't increase flood risk off-site. In terms of Councillor John's comments, the retail site identified it's referred to as Bridge House Farm in the plan, and that's how it was referred to in the planning application. It is the site that sits between Llanmaes and Llandrip Major. Around it is shown a green wedge. I think our position would be that if it's refused planning permission by Welsh Government on matters which are not detail matters, so the principle of it there, then that would have to be revisited, and that might become a green wedge. But we've not identified the site in Boverton, so Councillor John, feel free to come back to me after the meeting later this week if you want further clarity on that. And Councillor Carroll's comments, a number of them are kind of to similar principles I've covered already. I don't agree it's been rushed, certainly not. I know how much time has gone into this from the team and also from not just members of the council, members of the public. A lot of people have engaged and made positive comments. I say positive comments, I don't just mean support, I mean comments that have led to positive developments of this plan. It's taken a long time to get here. We've had to revise the delivery agreement, I think, twice because of reassessing, making changes, and doing further work. It's certainly not been rushed, and I would agree with the chair's comments in respect of this evening. And that's the purpose of the consultation window. It's a 6-week window, and that lets us all digest it again, and come back with comments. I don't think the process has been rushed, and I think members should feel very comfortable in progressing to council with this next week. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I don't see hands up from any other non-committee members, so I'm going to move to committee members. Councillor Elliott Penn, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Councillor.
Brilliant. Thank you. And just a few thoughts on the report. The deposit replacement local development plan, in my view, represents a thoughtful and forward-looking framework that builds on the preferred strategy to deliver sustainable growth. It addresses housing needs, employment opportunities and infrastructure, whilst prioritising placemaking, climate resilience and enhanced green infrastructure. My view, a prudent decision to remove the undeliverable North East Barry site demonstrates a pragmatic approach and ensures allocations are realistic and viable. The revised delivery agreement maintains momentum towards adoption. However, whilst the plan's emphasis on aligning development with public transport and protecting environmental assets is commendable, greater detail on mitigating potential delays in infrastructure delivery, as has been mentioned, a halt at St Athan, road improvement, school places, and extra GP places and retail. These would address past shortfalls in housing targets and would further strengthen its robustness and public confidence, I think. Overall, this RLDP provides a solid foundation to go out to consultation, and we should take all stakeholders' representations into account, as we do, and including the written responses we've all had, and I hope everyone's read them. Lots of objections. But lastly, I'd like to stress that what we build, once locations are finalised, which I think some have been, and all stakeholders' voices are heard, is vitally important. Research has repeatedly shown that the environment that you grow up in, you live in, you work in, has significant impacts on health and well-being and life chances. So when we do build, let's build with imagination, creativity, and with the environment at the forefront of any plans. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Ian, can you address that issue about that Councillor Penn has raised about wanting more detail in the plan? At what stage in this process can councillors expect to see that?
The deposit plan is the detailed plan. I mean, when it comes to
Councillors, please, can I ask you to show respect to officers when they're speaking? Thank you. Apologies, Ian. Please continue.
Thanks, Chair. When it comes to infrastructure improvements that come alongside and come off the back of developments, it will depend to a large degree on when we see those through the planned period. So obviously it's a 15-year period, and historically in the Vale, developers are keen to develop, and we don't generally have to wait long for our allocations to come forward as planning applications, but it will depend to a large degree on when applications are made and when those developments come forward. So the plan can't realistically say that, you know, X will come forward on this date, Y will come forward on this date, because they are reliant on the developments to bring them forward. So I can't propose that the plan will have that level of detail, and plans before haven't, and I think it would be unreliable to try and do that, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ernest, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've heard a lot this evening about sustainability, infrastructure, climate change, all sorts of exciting things. What the public actually want is the facilities. They want better roads, they want improved healthcare, they want housing, and they want to be able to travel, and they want to be able to shop. I don't think we've talked very much about this evening. I mean, I will raise one thing: health centre for Penarth. Now, a year or 2 years, possibly 3 years ago now, it was all the rage in Penarth. There was a new health centre going to be built next door to Cogan Leisure Centre. It was all planned. The money was almost there. The business case was put forward. Everything has gone absolutely dead quiet, absolute hush and quiet. The health centre won't come about now for probably the next 4 or 5 years. And yet so many people in Penarth are looking for those sort of facilities to look after their everyday health. There is one GP practice in Penarth with over 18,000 patients. And that was the figure I heard about a year ago, 18,000. I'm sure it's probably getting on for 19,000 now. We've heard from our friends in Dinas Powys about this development north of Dinas Powys off Cardiff Road. Actually, it just about falls within the Cornerswell ward of Penarth, because the boundary is the sign before you get down to what used to be the Swan pub, and it's proposed to have a set of traffic lights. Now, we all know that the Dinas Powys bypass has been scrapped by Labour. It was a proposal that the Conservatives put forward. They made good progress on it, and Labour threw it out the moment they came into power. So every morning we see huge queues right the way through Dinas Powys, people commuting from Barry, heading for Cardiff. And they're going to be faced not only with existing traffic, but they're going to be faced with a new set of traffic lights. I can think of nothing worse on Eastbrook Road. We need, Chairman, we need better roads. Now, we're not going to get better roads, but that's what we need. And unfortunately, I see nothing in the plan that proposes any new roads, anything. Lots of new houses, yes, lots of wonderful things, but people need to get from A to B. We're not even going to have a railway station in St Athan, and I wish my friends in that part of the world every success, because I think Transport for Wales could quite easily provide a station there. Might cost 3 or 4 million, but they could do it tomorrow morning if they had the wish and the desire to do it. So I think, in essence, Chairman, I'm not happy with this plan. Neither of a number of my colleagues, and because we don't see some of the positive things that need putting into the plan, better health, better roads, better anything you like, I can't support this plan tonight, and I will be voting against it until such time as the council is able to provide improved facilities within the RDLP. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, we've gone into some depth on the health points. I mean, I think the main points coming out there are about transport and road. It's not a plan to encourage driving. It's not a plan to encourage road use. We are looking to strike the right balance between encouraging sustainable modes and mitigating transport impacts as far as possible. And as I've said before, there is clearly, we believe, the scope to do that with the work that's been done so far, but it's not policy. It shouldn't be policy, and it's not our intention to try and make it as easy as possible to drive everywhere and build new roads. I just think that's counter intuitive in the context of the climate emergency and in the context of where planning policy has gone. It's not about increasing road capacity. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper, please.
Thank you, Chair. And first thing I just want to say is that this replacement local development plan has taken a lot of work. And I want to thank the team for the work that's gone in. I think that sometimes we spend a lot of times criticising it. That doesn't mean we don't respect the work that's gone into this. I don't agree with it all, but it's good work. The first thing I just want to pick up as well is that Ian referenced that there's been rigorous scrutiny, and I just want to bring it to the attention. We've got a lot of people watching tonight because this is important. This council doesn't scrutinise enough. We don't allow enough time to go into detail. And that's why some of these things are still coming back and people are concerned with it because concerns aren't addressed. This replacement local development plan will be voted through on partisan lines. And that means that we don't get the chance to be able to deal with it as effectively as we would. I'm not going to, because this isn't the time, I'm not going to go through individual sites because this isn't the time to go through individual sites. But there are some broader contexts I'd like to bring up. The Vale of Glamorgan is part of a wider economic area. You know, it's over 10 years ago now that we signed up for the Cardiff City region, or whatever it's called these days. But we've yet to have the promised strategic development plan. We'd really appreciate some sort of understanding of where that is, what's holding it up, and why isn't it part of this plan. Second point, it's important we have the right houses in the right places for those people who need it. So Welsh Government housing projections show a substantial increase in older people living in the Vale by the end of the plan period, and a 17% increase in single-person households, the largest in Wales. How will this plan make that difference, particularly as we're seeing sites where there are 3 and 4 beds detached and others going up in the sites? So I'd like that point to be addressed. The next point is about development plans are important for the control of developments, but important we accurately meet need. We can't control everything, but the council are the biggest single landlord in the area with 4,000 council properties. And through the housing list, the best quality data on who is in direct need of good quality housing. How does the plan take us closer to appropriately housing those people in need, and who are not currently properly housed? We were told there were 900 of those households in Barry. How many is that across the Vale? The last point I want to make, this is about setting up a consultation. Consultations are rarely listened to and insufficiently taken seriously by those people we most want to talk to. How are we going to make this 6 weeks work for a consultation? How are we going to make sure that people come in, feel heard, and will be helped in that as well? At the last scrutiny meeting, we had people talking to us about the Waycott Cross development. They spoke really eloquently about the issues they had with it. There were other sites in Barry which don't have the same, they have more, with higher levels of poverty. Nobody spoke for those people, apart from the councillors who represent them. What we need to do is make sure that everyone gets represented in this consultation, and I'd really appreciate some views as to how that's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Ian, can I bring you in on that point? Can I just add to one of the points that Councillor Hooper's made, so that the plan talks about the fact that the Vale population has increased as a result of net migration from Cardiff, and one of the aims is to encourage inward migration to deliver a balanced population, because as you rightly say, Councillor Hooper, the Vale has an ageing population compared to the rest of Wales, in fact. So given that, how will we ensure, for example, that affordable housing actually benefits, sorry Ian, I'm I'm throwing a lot at you.
No, I'm just trying to research on a point so I can.
You take your time. You take your time. My question is about how we can ensure that affordable housing will actually meet the needs of the population in the Vale who are waiting on our council housing list. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Hooper, I might have missed one of your points when I was trying to research another of your points. So if I've missed it, let me know at the end. Okay, great. The delivery agreement for the SDP is in place, so I can send this to you as well. But the sort of the headline bits are that it projects submission to PEDU for examination in December 2030. And then, I mean, there's a number of stages before that, but I won't bore you with them all. Examination in first half of 31, inspector's report, second half of 31, adoption, end of 31, start of 32. So that's kind of where that is. But there's a lot more in the delivery agreement than just that. So I'll send that. I can send that on. But housing need across the, and this, I'll merge it with the chair's question as well. I mean, housing for those that need it across the Vale. If I've missed the point of your question, let me know. The sites will not, as I said earlier, the sites will not deal with all the housing need in the Vale because there's too much. And the only way we could do that is to allocate an awful lot more housing. And as you can see, there's obviously, it's difficult to allocate housing in a way that satisfies everyone's needs in terms of infrastructure, in terms of location. So we're trying to hit that spot where we're allocating as much or delivering as much affordable housing as we can, whilst having regard to and respect for all the other sort of competing issues that go against that. The local lettings policies in place for the council will ensure that it goes to those in local need and in most need. There's a slightly different lettings policy in relation between the rural exception sites and the proportions of the kind of the other allocated sites, but in both cases initially it goes to local need and highest need. So that's the principal way that we ensure it meets our local needs. Just on that point, actually, I referred earlier to the rural affordable housing led sites, which would be at least 50%. We're seeking to get agreement on a policy which requires the market proportion of the site to have regard to what local need is in those areas. So not the affordable part, but the market part, because we hear frequently at planning committee and in other environments about the needs of communities for people, for whether it's smaller units for older people, but that don't meet the definition of affordable housing. So that policy will hopefully work towards that. So yeah, the plan won't address all the housing need, but we are trying to address as much of it as possible. And I said earlier, the viability testing ensures that the percentages that are being delivered are as high as they can be in the context of the other things that these sites need to deliver.
Thank you, Ian. And then I think there was another question around ensuring that the 6-week consultation process reaches as wide a population as possible. If we let Ian answer the question around consultation, and then do come back in, Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chair. So we've got 7 in-person events planned, and we've carried out similar events through all the stages thus far, and some have been more well attended than others. We publicise them as widely as we can, and we encourage attendance at them, and they involve officers, giving answers, listening to, talking to, dozens and dozens of residents for hours and hours on end. So officers will respond to and be there to listen to and to answer every question, every comment that's put to them. So there's an absolute commitment from the team to do that. I think, it's important that they're publicised as widely as possible to make sure that they reach as many people as possible. And I think we've talked about this before, and I think I mentioned it previously when I was advocating for maybe some of the people that don't engage in the process. There are people that don't, and often they will be people that will get very real benefits from the plan. There will also, as I said, be people that don't engage that would have concerns with the plan as well. So we can't assume it's one-sided. So yeah, I agree with the need to get the reach as wide as possible. And when we are trying to do that.
Councillor Hooper, you want to come back in?
Yeah, just very briefly. I think the other point, the point I was making was about the typology, making sure that we fit so it's not just the housing need, but it's how it's the change in the population. Are we getting single person households in here? So are we trying to make sure that we're getting the right sort of houses for the right people? That's the one point. On there, just very briefly, when it comes to consultation, and then like Councillor Penn suggested locations were finalised. Let's just be clear, this is going out to consultation. They aren't finalised. And what we've got to make sure is that you're suggesting the same things as we've always done, Ian. And my concern is that doesn't address the issues that we both, I think, agree on, that some people are left out. So are there more innovative ways that we deal with this next 6 weeks consultation, accepting the fact that we're effectively in it very, very shortly? So, you know, need some people to get their heads together quite quickly to improve it, because at the moment it isn't, to my view, good enough.
Can I suggest that we might have a role in that as elected members? I think, you know, if we have concerns around what's proposed in terms of consultation reach within our ward, and we have suggestions around how that might be improved, I would imagine that officers would welcome hearing from elected members. But I'll let you respond to that.
That's fine. I would agree with that, and would be happy to hear any such views. I mean, we'll publicise it as widely as possible across the various media channels, and I think that's obviously significantly more effective than probably plans in the past before. You know, social media was what it is now. I think that, alongside the in-person events and broadcasting everything on our website, means things are as accessible as they ever have been. If any member or anybody has got other ideas about other innovative ways of broadcasting that, then I'm happy to listen and have a conversation about that. In terms of the housing mix, so with affordable elements in particular, the requirements will always be for them to be reflective of what the need is in the area, and that's generally smaller units in the area of highest need. Historically, maybe affordable proportions of developments were more driven by the mix being reflective of the mix of market units, so that it was maybe more seamless to see kind of where the affordable were, but it's very much driven now, has been for some years, but very much driven now by where the need is. I touched on how we could potentially impact on how some of the kind of the mix of some of the market units. I mean, it's always really been, the market units has always really been something left to the market, in that, you know, principally those that deliver the housing it's in their interest to deliver what the greatest demand is for, I guess, alongside profit as well. But it's, you know, the approach with those rural sites is something relatively new. I think another authority in Wales might be proposing something similar. It might be slightly ahead of us in the plan process, so we might see how that's received by an inspector at a plan examination in advance of ours. Affordable housing is where we have greatest impact on that mix and meeting local needs.
Thank you, Ian. Just to give you notice, I do want to draw this debate to a close. So there are still some hands up. We'll take those final comments. Councillor Champion, thank you for your patience. I know you've been waiting a long time.
Thank you very much. In relation to consultation, if you've allocated places where you are going to be consultating, maybe you put a poster up to say it's going to happen in the week's time, so people have a chance to, because not everyone is on social media, not everyone will go to the website. People from old people to perhaps younger people without the ability. So maybe a poster is one of the good things. On South Farm in St Athan, I noticed now it's talking about a link to the school and the possible expansion of that school. But looking at the section 106, It says either 5 million or hand over some land and less money. I have talked about health centre in St Athan before, and all what you've said this evening about the health board. If you had a allocation of land for a health centre earmarked, you haven't got to say health centre, you can say this land is earmarked for future use. And I know you've got some purple bits, which is for shops. But is that land allocated now? Because although it's a deposit plan and there are plans will develop from that, but if not on the deposit plan, then there's no guarantee that the developer will actually do anything. So that's one of my points, really. There are others, but I'll keep it short.
Thank you, Councillor. Ian.
Yeah, just briefly, I think that's a good idea about advanced notifications at location. So we'll get straight on that. Vic has also mentioned to me about site notices going up as well, which will help. One of the strategic sites, or one of the key sites in St Athan, does in their kind of indicative master planning identify community buildings. So there is scope, I would say, within these St Athan allocations, and this, I guess, talks to one of the points I made earlier about retail provision, and I think I'm referred to community/education facilities. So, yes.
Can I just cut across you there, Ian?
Yeah.
Because a community facility could be anything, but Clare Garden Village in Cowbridge, there are 400 odd houses, and a lot of villages only have about 400 houses, but they have nothing there, no community facility, no sort of community hall. And if you're going to be building 900 houses in St Athan, they need to have community facilities on top of healthcare facilities.
Thanks, Councillor Champion. Yeah, I mean, we're not at a stage where we can say that would be a community facility of this prescriptive type. A health facility would, in our view, fall within the scope of community facilities. It's about what the greatest need is within an area, and engagement with the community council and within the community there helps inform, and the health board helps us inform us what are the areas of greatest need. I don't want this to sound negative, but there is only so much. So if we're looking at providing a new health facility within a key site, we have Section 106 policies, and there are viability limits, as I said, which do place a cap on things. So if there is scope to provide community facilities or a contribution to create a community facility in line with our policy, in principle, it is a kind of a health warning, no pun. It may be difficult to say, well, let's double up on that and provide twice the level of community facilities that we can normally justify asking for. There will always be a limit, but I'm just saying that there is scope for those for healthcare to form part of that conversation and form part of that kind of use.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Iannucci.
Thank you, Chair. Is only a quick one, just to build on what Councillors Hooper and Champion have said about digital exclusion for the consultation. So if we want to make sure that we're really maximising the reach that we are going to get, have we done any work to ask colleagues in town and community councils to share it? Because they are often a lot closer to their communities than we are. And I know that a lot of us are twin-hatted anyway, but that seems like a really useful resource that we could use, and they could promote it via their channels. And just things like good old-fashioned newspapers. Are we doing anything in print media? Are we doing leaflets? Like, what is our actual scope for getting out there?
Thank you, Councillor.
That's good. That's fair. And yes, regarding town and community councils, I don't think we. I mean, you wouldn't believe the cost of putting things in. I mean, when we do site notices for planning applications, which mind-bogglingly the legislation still requires us to do that rather than to publicise in different means, and it costs a fortune to put things. So it's and the reach isn't great as far as we know. So we can look into that, but I think we're mostly looking to focus on more efficient kind of means.
Sorry, I might have missed that. So are we engaging with town and community councils?
We will engage with them now. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, great, thank you. Councillor Penn, you've already spoken, but did you want to come back in? No, your hand has gone down. Thank you. Councillor Perry, please.
Hi, good evening again. I think George Carroll spoke very well this evening, and again, Mark Hooper, so thank you to them for their contributions in particular. We have a problem here with the politics rather than the officers, so there is some good stuff that's appeared in this RLDP, but that's not what we're focusing on tonight. It's the RLDP of the party that was formerly the Labour Party and is now on 10% in the polls. The credibility of the Labour Party, or what was the Labour Party, is very, very low. And I think that's a big, big problem, not just for those people hanging on in dear life to the Labour Party, but to the nation as a whole. We talked about infrastructure, and Stephen Haynes raised it, as have other members this evening. The Dutch and Germans and other nations, they will put in the infrastructure and the services first, whereas here in Wales, we build the houses and then use the car to sort everything else out and do it later, if at all. Hence, we have places like Clare Gardens or hundreds of houses with no facilities, and that is repeated throughout Wales. There are no community built, no halls. St Athan has no railway station. When will it ever appear? We've got the same issues in Roos, where there are very few services, and the bus times from St Athan or Roos are incredibly long. And when you look at the journey times by car in comparison, you have no option but to use the car. And once you've bought the car, you're going to make all your trips by car. You know, we need some limited stop direct bus services supported by connecting services, but there's no strategic plan. Transport for Wales, what are they doing? It's all too late, too slow, and they need to get a move on and do something, but we know they're not, because they all drive cars, and that's how they see the future, because we're all going to be driving these electric cars. Which brings me on to the strategic transport assessment, which is missing from the 980 pages. And why is it missing? Because it will be ridiculed by the residents. Apparently, there's going to be a 6% increase of traffic at Culverhouse Cross. 6%. And apparently, that is within capacity. What? I mean, I travel outside of the peak periods, and I try to avoid Culverhouse Cross. In fact, when I travel there, I put my sat-nav on to see how long the congestion will be. And if I'm on the M4, I'll come off at junction 34 instead. Or sometimes I'll come in through St Bride's and St George's. My residents see me and think, oh, I'm checking on them. No, I'm avoiding the traffic at Culverhouse Cross, and as do other people, because Culverhouse Cross is way over capacity outside of peak hours, never mind in peak hours. So that is a nonsense on which this LDP is built on. We did talk about 15-minute cities in this scrutiny committee, or its predecessor before, and I don't quite see how we are following the principles of the 15-minute cities, because we are going back into cars, or perhaps it's a 15-minute drive when there's no other car on the road. We have declared a climate emergency and a nature emergency. That should be the major constraint on this. It's an afterthought. Yeah, we talk about having these buildings that are very, very efficient, like our schools, which apparently are not as efficient as we were led to believe they would be. The constraints of the climate emergency should be leading this whole process. I think it's page 15 where it first gets mentioned. Right down, it should be on page 1, bang. How are we going to build the properties that we do need within the carbon budget of the nation of Wales? As it is, we build as many as we can because we put in moving people from private rental accommodation to social housing as a priority above the planet. Well, what happens when we flood all those people with sea level rises? Then they need rehousing. That's not really taken seriously enough, and I don't think many members here understand the dire consequences of climate change and sea level rises and flooding. And are our flooding models up to date? And are we taking seriously the increased likelihood of extreme weather events, which will lead to more flooding in the future? I don't think we're up to date, and I don't think we're thinking about 2050, 2075, as we should be doing. There's no limits to growth, according to the Labour Party, or what was formed in the Labour Party, and we are experiencing tragedy of the commons over and over and over again. I'm going to just keep it very, very brief, and I thank...
Councillor, you have 10 seconds.
Thank the residents for their contributions, and I have read every single one, and I can't say I've read all 980 pages of what's come through in the time that was available to me in the last couple of weeks. I do apologise, but there isn't unlimited time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, I think you've addressed much of that. Was there anything? No, there's nothing you need to add to that. Councillor Penn, yours is the last comment on this matter, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Hooper said earlier about what I'd said. I actually said that, lastly, I'd like to stress that once we build, once locations are finalised and all stakeholders' voices heard is vitally important. I said once finalised, just to clarify on what he said. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So thank you, committee, for what I think has been a really constructive debate and scrutiny of the report before us. So the recommendation that's relevant for this committee is that we consider the report and approve it for consultation unless there are specific recommendations that we want to refer back to Cabinet. I don't have any. Are there any specific recommendations for Cabinet? No. In that case, I move the recommendation that the report should be approved for consultation. Can I have a seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillor Iannucci, thank you very much. Dissent?
Can we have recorded vote?
We can indeed. You don't have an alternative recommendation? You just don't agree with that recommendation? Fine, we will move to a vote. So the recommendation that has been seconded.
Sorry, Chairman, I was going to move that we do not approve the plan in its present form and we refer it back to Cabinet for suitable amendments to be made.
We'll vote on the first recommendation first, Councillor Ernest, which is that the report goes for consultation. So we'll take a recorded vote on that first.
Can I just ask something off record perhaps, but is it not possible?
No, Councillor, you can't ask anything off the record. You are on the record in this committee. If you wish to speak, press your button. Thank you.
Yeah, we've set up these little focus groups, these little working groups, and we're looking at beach access, which we started months and months ago, and goodness knows where that got to. But would this scrutiny committee not be better at this point deferring this decision, and we can meet perhaps off camera and look into the detail of this 980-page report as working groups? And come back, because at the moment the scrutiny is not good enough.
Thank you, Councillor. So first of all, I'm going to take issue with what you said about the task and finish group. That group is working really, really hard. That's a cross-party group which is doing excellent work, visiting sites across the Vale. So that's where that is. That's a very active group that will bring a lively report back to scrutiny in due course. We have a recommendation. We have recommendation before us to move that this report is released for consultation. We're going to take a vote on that and then let's see where we are after that.
Just to check on that, Chair, is this going to be recorded vote or not? Just to double check.
It's been requested, so yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for confirming that, committee. Just to confirm on the wording of the recommendation, are we saying that the committee agree the report will be referred to consultation? Is that what we're going to make? Yes. Okay, just to double check. Chair will start the vote. All votes are in now, Chair.
You give us the result.
Yeah. Right, we have 6 for, 5 against, 1 abstain.
Thank you, committee. So we agree then that the report be referred for consultation.
And recorded vote is coming up now, Chair.
Thank you very much. So the previous recommendations obviously fall in that instance. I have no further agenda items and no other important business. So thank you for committee for your engagement tonight. Thank you to officers, particularly Ian. It's been a very long session. We're very grateful for the way that you've engaged with committee tonight. Thank you. It just remains for me to say we meet again on the 20th of January for the usual place committee meeting. Thank you all.